Welcome to the Vale
Matters
Podcast, brought to you by Evesham Noticeboard Group.
We will explore topics from local politics and economy to education and events dedicated to Evesham, Pershore and Broadway.
We will also feature stories from everyday people to learn about their experiences and get a better understanding of how our community is changing.
So join us.
Let's talk about the things that matter in the Vale.
Okay, welcome to our first Vale Matters podcast. We're here in the studios in Evesham and we hope you enjoy the show. I'm really pleased to have a talented co-host with us today, Keith Norledge, and a VIP guest. Keith, as some of you may know, is from Phoenix Theatre Group. And for those that don't know, Keith can give us the lowdown on our local theatre group. So what is the Phoenix Theatre Group all about?
Thanks, Katie. Phoenix Theatre Group. Yeah, it was actually started 33 years ago, would you believe, by myself and two others, with the idea of trying to give the local children the opportunity to get on stage and have a go, irrespective of their abilities. Little did I think 33 years later we'd still be here doing it. Well, some of us would still be here doing it. And we basically put on 2 shows a year. We put on the annual pantomime at the Henrician Theatre every January for a week. And we also do a musical in October. And just to give you a flavour of what we do, last year we did Shrek the Musical. Sold out every single seat over 5 performances. And then we've just had pantomime, which we finished last month.
Excellent. So, and you've got the next show is auditioning?
Yeah,
or
the next show's auditioning. That's a very good plug for us. Thank you very much. The next show's auditioning actually in a few weeks' time. 5th of March, we're actually auditioning for the Addams Family Musical, which will be another monstrous show. A bit of a pun there, you know. That will take place at the Henrician Theatre on the 5th of March. Full details on our website, www.phoenixtheatregroup.co.uk.
Excellent. And is that for any age group to apply as well? And
we actually cater for anybody over the age of 11. And when I say over the age of 11, I think the eldest person we've had on stage was in their 80s. So it is literally anybody over the age of 11 is welcome to come along, regardless of your age or ability. You'll be more than welcome to come and see what we're all about.
That's excellent. So have you got the hand yet?
The hand, believe it or not, but the hand doesn't actually appear in the Addams Family Musical.
Wow, that's...
I know, but there might be a guest appearance because we are looking at that at the moment, but it's not actually scripted to appear, let's say that.
Excellent.
But we've got Wednesday and we've got Uncle Fester.
And Wednesday's really in at the moment.
Wednesday's really in with the Netflix show at the moment, so we're hoping that Evesham are going to come out like they did for Shrek and support us, because although it's amateur, we try to put on as professional a show as possible. So,
excellent. And you're on Facebook as well, aren't you? So they can follow you on Facebook.
They can follow us on Facebook. They can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. And I believe we're even going on TikTok as well, but that's beyond my capabilities, I'm afraid. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Keith.
Okay.
On the topic of theatre and local talent, it's time to introduce our very own locally grown, BAFTA-winning impressionist, actor, stand-up comedian, writer, and now talented pianist. Welcome, Alistair. You're a man of many talents. Thank you for joining us. Pianist, right. Yes, sorry. I'm blaming it on my sore throat.
Yes. I quite like pianist, although it does make me sound like I mend them.
So we wanted to start off with some quick fire questions, if that's okay. Just to sort of get a feel for, this is what we're going to do on all our podcasts with our guests. It's not victimising you. So we just want to ask, is it football or tennis?
If I had to choose one, oh gosh. Well, tennis, I suppose.
Tennis, that's good. Asparagus or cabbage?
Asparagus.
That's really Evesham of you. Yeah. Theatre or film?
Film.
80s, 90s or noughties?
Ooh, 90s.
90s? Now, this is a difficult one. Evesham United or Leeds United?
Well, probably have to say Leeds United.
Leeds United.
Yeah.
So you've gone from a small town to the big stage. Can you just explain what was life like growing up in Evesham? Have any favourite memories?
Well, it's so strange. I'm sure a lot of people do this now, but you think I grew up I was born in 1964. So my sort of childhood in Evesham was 1969, I suppose, in the Vale at least, up until 1983. So you think 1970, that's actually 50 odd years ago. So that's the equivalent of somebody in 1970 looking back on the 1920s.
Yes.
So when I say, gosh, Evesham's changed so much since I was a child, of course it has, because it changed a lot between the 1920s and the 1970s. So my memories of it were, it was a really nice place to grow up. I was very generally happy there, I think, and there seemed to be a lot to do. There was a really lovely mixture, I suppose, although you're not aware of it at the time when you're that age, of the rural and whatever a town is, I suppose. It's certainly not urban, but there was just lots of different things one could do. And I was very lucky there were lots of people around who were sort of movers and shakers in those days. I'm sure there still are. I hope there still are, although I'm sure all the rules are different now. But there was a wonderful man, for instance, called Henry Hawker. And Henry was a good family friend. He was he used to sing very well, and he played tennis pretty well. But he was very, very good at table tennis and very good at organizing things. And people like Henry, I'm sure they're still there, but he organized this whole table tennis thing within people's garages. You'd have teams of 3 or 4 people who'd enter a league, and you'd play it in people's garages. I remember playing in a garage in on the Four Pools estate, and going
Brilliant.
to places like Littleton and Honeybourne and playing effectively matches against people. And they had table tennis tables in the garage. It wasn't just cars, but you'd play a table tennis match in someone's garage, 2 or 3 people from this village against 2 or 3 people from the town or wherever. And that doesn't. I'm sure I'm not selling Evesham in the 1970s and 80s to young people. Wow, you used to play table tennis in each other's garages. But what I mean is there were people who organised things and who did things, and you had that side of things, and then there was school plays. I used to love being involved in the school plays, and then getting involved in the art centre plays as well, which was a new thing in those days. The art centre was pretty new, so I got involved very early on as a 17 or 18-year-old in plays there, and also just being a member at the Evesham Rowing Club, which is still going and still going strong, but was a wonderful place to be in the 70s and early 80s. And we'd play snooker down there, and obviously tennis. I didn't row, but squash as well down there. So that was an amazing thing to be part of. And just school sports were so strong. And I kept a diary in 1980, I think. So I was, about 15 then. And I looked back at that recently, and all it was played badminton at school, played squash at the rowing club, played table tennis in the evening in a garage in Littleton, rehearsed a play. There was all this sort of stuff going on, as well as the school I was at, the high school, was a terrific school with great facilities for everything, obviously learning, but also for sport as well, playing football there. And so, I was a very happy child with lots and lots of things to do.
It sounds like a really good childhood. And I think it's still present in Evesham as well, the community spirit, where you've mentioned there's local heroes and local people in the town that pull us together and do things like Keith with the Phoenix Theatre Group and the Art Centre, and that I think that's still happening. Did you have a favourite shop that you used to go to in Evesham? Do you remember any of the shops, any sweet shops or?
Yeah. Oh yes. Well, again, I suppose in those days, as I say, a long time ago, supermarkets didn't really exist. We had McFisheries, I think, was one, and but there was no big Tesco, Lidl, all that sort of stuff. So people did their shopping locally, and that was a great thing. And of course, I really mourn the loss of that everywhere, because I think supermarkets have dominated, and Evesham's a great example of that, where the town sort of turned itself inside out, if you like. And the centre of the town now, there's not much to do, and people don't go there in the way we used to just wander down on foot from, Norfolk Road, North Road, all those streets, Vine Street. You just walk down Port Street, and you could get everything from Joe Webb's. You could get everything from Robins's, the bakers, which was one of my favourite experiences going into Robbins. But probably my favourite shop, I think, which really sums me up, was Wilde's fruit and veg shop. And I used to love going in there to see Mr. Wilde. And my mum would always go and get me this from Wilde's. And I'd think, oh, great. And I used to get 6 apples or 6, whatever it was, from Mr. Wilde, and all this fruit and veg. And to this day, living in London and certainly living now where I am in Shropshire, the shop I go to most is the local fruit and veg shop. And I think that all stems from a love of fruit and veg from being from the Vale, but also from going into Wilde's fruit and veg shop.
Yeah. So you're on the other side of the town then. You had to cross the bridge to come into town every day.
Well, yes, I was in Bengeworth. So, but we just never thought of it as Bengeworth. It was Evesham. And so, we just go over the river to school at Swan Lane or wherever else.
Yeah.
But everybody was on foot in those days. That was the thing. Everybody walked everywhere. And that's the thing I noticed most coming back to Evesham now is how few people I see on foot. And even where I am now in Shropshire, it's a similar thing, a small town, but they build on the outskirts of the town, but don't build any shops. So, you kind of have to have a car, but then people drive absolutely everywhere and get out of the habit of walking. And then the town centre dies because everybody wants to park outside the shop, and they will park outside the supermarket. And you see it absolutely everywhere. But my memory of Evesham in those days was, just walking down Bengeworth to Port Street, get everything.
Lovely.
To this day, I still do this ridiculous thing where my mum would always say, go down to Cockerton's, was another shop, some people might remember, which was run by the Cockerton family. That was off the back of Norfolk Road. So I think that was North Road that was on. And that was a great place. You could get everything in Cockerton's, sweets particularly.
Was that on the corner? Was that on the corner? Because I used to live on North Road.
Well, there was one just down the road on North Road, wasn't it? I think that was Cockerton's. And of course, Jim Cockerton is still heavily involved with Evesham United Football Club. So
really?
The Cockerton family is still around and about. But the shop sadly went several years ago.
Yeah, but that was always great. And Mum would say, go and get something from Cockerton's, or go and get something from Wilde's, or go and get something. And she would give me the money, and then she'd say, make sure you bring the change. And I'd always take it upon myself to run to the shop and to run back almost to the house, but I'd stop just before I got within vision so that I could get my breath back and be seen walking in. Always so that she'd say, that was quick. And I used to love to do things so quickly.
Brilliant.
And sadly, I was trying to explain this to my wife recently. I said, that's the reason why I still rush everything, is I try and get things done, whether it's learning a piece of piano music or going to the shops now. I still like to come back or to learn something, to do something, and have somebody say, gosh, that was quick. And it all stems from this weird habit I had of running to the shop to try and be as quick as I could so that Mum would be surprised.
Wow. So you mentioned you went to Evesham High, is that right?
Yes, Simon de Montfort.
Simon de Montfort, yeah. So, and did you like school? Was it challenging or easy for you?
I did. I really enjoyed school. Bits of it were challenging. Obviously, it wasn't easy. That's why you go. But we had some very, very good teachers, and I had a good school experience and joined in with everything, really, I suppose. As I said before, the theatre stuff and sports things. So I always had friends in different groups, if you like, which was good. But the teachers were great, and I really enjoyed nearly all of the lessons. The one thing I hated from my youngest days onwards at Swan Lane was art. I was hopeless at art, and I used to hate it at Swan Lane when you'd come in from break sometimes, and lessons were pretty unstructured in those days. You never knew quite what you were going to be doing from one moment to the next, but you'd come in and there'd be newspaper on the tables and this sort of powdered paint, and I'd go, oh no, it's art. And everybody else used to love it. They loved it. And I say, oh no, can't we do maths instead? So, we always had very good teachers at all the schools I was at.
With your teachers, Alistair, who was your favourite teacher?
It's so difficult to choose.
I can think of loads myself, because obviously I went to Evesham High as well, and there were some real characters. Like I don't know, I think you were a couple of years below me, because obviously I was in the same year as your sister. But one of the great guys that I loved was Mr. Gouda. Do you remember Mr. Gouda?
Oh, Mr. Gouda was terrific.
And he used to run the school bookshop as well. And I used to help out in the bookshop. And he was just such a great guy. And I don't know, he wasn't your normal teacher, because he was like, a friend really. And I think I actually learned more from people like Mr. Gouda, because he was on the same level, But there were some superb teachers, and Nobby Clark. Do you remember Nobby Clark?
I barely experienced Nobby Clark.
Oh,
That's
a good
I can
name,
see him.
isn't
I can
it?
see him with
Is that an Evesham name? Nobby
Mr.
Clark.
Bradshaw, Mr. Bradshaw, Ted Bradshaw.
Yes,
Ted
Mr. Bradshaw was fantastic.
they were both French teachers, but real
Mr. McKechnie Smith.
McKechnie Smith
was very
oh
good.
my gosh, yeah, maths teacher.
Mr. Brown was a very good French teacher from Derbyshire who had this very strong Derbyshire accent. And my sister Kay, who you mentioned, used to do very good impressions of a lot of the teachers. And she used to do Mr. Brown, who apparently he once looked at my sister and said, "Kay McGowan, the light of my life." And this was one she used to come out with. And then there was, I don't think it was Mr. Freeman. It was whoever he
Mr.
taught RE. There was somebody else my sister used to do who had this big lower jaw, and apparently he got a bad temper with her and once said, "Confound you, girl!" I can't remember who that was.
Trying to think.
It was a teacher who'd gone by the time I was at the school. But my favourites, I suppose, I had an English teacher called Mopsy Hessling-Brown, Miss Hessling-Brown, who came late when we were doing... She did drama. She was quite inspirational and very coquettish. And then a lovely English teacher called Miss Williams, who was sort of in her first job, I think. She was about 23 and we were all totally in love with Miss Williams. And then there was a great sociology teacher who came when I was doing sociology in the 6th year, and that was a new subject called Jerry Solven. And he let us call him Jerry, which was the first time we'd called a teacher by name. And he looked like Jesus, Mr. Solven, and everybody was totally in awe of Jerry Solven. But I suppose of all the people who really inspired me, I think probably Jim Griffith, who was my English teacher at A level, I think at O level as well. He really got me interested in books and encouraged me to read around the subject. And that's why I went on to do that. And also why I have a lifelong love of Dylan Thomas is all thanks to him. And in fact, I went to Dylan Thomas's birthplace, Larne, about 4 years ago with my wife, prior to doing Under Milkwood on stage at Newbury Theatre in Berkshire. And it all stemmed from that, really. And it was a wonderful feeling because Jim had been born himself in Larne, which is an incredibly beautiful Welsh, I suppose it's a town, really, well, somewhere between a village and a town. But that's where Dylan Thomas lived and wrote. And so it felt amazing, sort of, what would it have been, 50 years on, more or less 45 years on, from being introduced to that and hearing Mr. Williams talking about Larne to actually going to Larne. And that was a really sort of moving experience being there.
Wow.
But so he was a great teacher. And also the person who had most influence on my character, I think, was David Forbert, who was our deputy head in our last few years. And Mr. Forbert went on to Malvern. I think he's still associated with Malvern. I met somebody recently who was talking about him, but he was really inspirational in terms of what you could do as a person and what you should do and your societal responsibilities, even to the point of, he had this wonderful catchphrase, if you see a bit of litter, don't walk past it, pick it up. And to this day, I do that. And if I see litter somewhere and I can affect it positively, I will pick it up and put it in the bin. And it's all thanks to Mr. Forbert. And that's just a tiny little instance of his influence on me. But he taught me French at A level, and he just made you feel that you could do anything you wanted with the right attitude, that the world was yours for the taking. And that was the first time I'd come across that attitude.
Wow.
Generally, it was always, you do this to get by, or you do this because you've got to learn it, or you do this because you want to be a biologist or a chemist or whatever. But he was something else. He was really... Yeah, I've never said that before, but it was true.
Yeah.
He made me feel I could do anything.
That's lovely.
I don't know whether Mr. Forbert will be listening, but certainly Jim Griffiths is still about. So I used to go to college with his daughter Jane, and he's still living in Hampton. So I'll try and make sure he's listening to the podcast.
That's sweet.
Yes.
That's nice. So what age did you start doing impersonations? Was that during school? Was it the teachers that inspired you?
No, not really. I mean, if I'd done it at school, I would now go into my impression of Jim Griffiths, which I should be able to do because he had a wonderfully strong Welsh accent. And I still hear his voice in my head. I couldn't impersonate him because I wasn't thinking about doing it in those days. But he always used to say particular and perpendicular. And I always remember hearing that sound and thinking,
Brilliant.
What's that about? Why doesn't he say particular? But it's such a Welsh thing. And you hear Hugh Edwards now doing the news, and he'll say the same thing. In particular, they've said that this perpendicular situation. So he had a very similar sort of Swansea, South Wales accent to Jim Griffiths, really, Hugh Edwards. So that became translated into Hugh. But the first people I started doing, I think, were after I left school. I didn't really, to my knowledge, somebody might correct me, but I don't think I did any impersonations at school, really.
Right.
I was really when my voice broke, and my sister and I were chatting one day, and my voice had suddenly gone deeper, and she said, "You sound like John Peel." And I don't know if people remember John Peel, but suddenly I suppose I found myself talking like John Peel at home, and Kay said, "Oh, you should work on that." So I think John Peel was the first person I did, sort of by default, really, just because my voice broke and having a slight Midlands accent, it turned into Peely, even though he had nothing to do with the West Midlands at all himself. But his own accent became bastardised from wherever he was from near Liverpool to sounding like he was from Birmingham.
Brilliant. So can you do the Evesham accent? The Evesham?
No, I can't really do that. I know. Well, I can do Evesham. In fact, well, I probably shouldn't say this, but when I was doing my early jobs on the radio, it was a sketch show, topical sketch show. And I used to get quite not annoyed, but because it was in London, everybody's default setting for anybody who was a policeman or whatever else would be, "Oh, all right, how you doing? All right." And builders were always from London, and everybody did these London characters. And I thought, hang on a minute. So I remember trying to throw in regional accents, and I got a few away. Like Nottingham was somewhere I spent quite a lot of time, and nobody really knew the Nottingham accent in those days, so it always sounded a bit odd. Jermaine Genius now is from Nottingham. You hear him all the time on the one show, and people might think, "What's that accent?" But that's Nottingham. You got pure Nottingham accent he's got, and all them things like Shane Meadows and all them people that did those programs. You hear that accent now, but that was a strange one to get by. But I used to try and do some Evesham characters, and they would always say, "What's that? Oh, oh no, we can't. No, people don't sound like that." And I said, "Yes, they do." So I'd be saying, doing a policeman going, "Yeah, he come round and he was round here, and wow, what time do you think it was when he left? Would you say what did the accused look like?" And they said, "No, we can't have that accent." So, oh, okay. So the Evesham accent. Yeah, it was. I could do it well, but it never passed muster. People would never accept it as an accent that would be used in sketches or things. I don't know what they thought it was, but even now, if I do stuff and try and do it like that, people sort of say, "Oh, can you make it a bit less rural, or can you make it sound a bit, more
that's not fair,
Devony?" No, it's very strange. So I think it's an accent people aren't really aware of very much.
If you were going to describe Evesham to somebody, Alistair, how would you sell it to somebody as a place to actually come to? Is there something that you think in Evesham is outstanding, or?
Well, I suppose I'm a little biased. I'd probably have to say the Regal. That
right.
There's this fantastic cinema which is a destination cinema, and it's something about Evesham which is very, very modern. I think it's very desirable, and to go and sit in those wonderful seats seeing these films at any time of day. It's so well run, and the programming is good, and just to be in that historic building, but to have it so modernized. I was in York recently. There's a wonderful cinema there called the Everyman. Is it the Everyman? It used to be the Odeon anyway. I think it's called the Everyman now. But somewhere like that, and there's a great cinema in Manchester. I was there for a couple of days recently, and I thought, what am I going to do? And Evesham's so lucky that, alongside these big cities like York and Manchester and wherever else, Nottingham has a good one called the Broadway. Suddenly you've got this really, really top-notch independent cinema, and I'd say that's probably the thing that I would recommend to people most.
Okay. Have you visited, have you been to the Battle of Evesham event that happens?
No.
So that's a fantastic event, and it's celebrating our history and the Abbey and the Almonry Museum. So it's on in June. So
no, it's August.
It's August.
First weekend in August.
First weekend in August.
And I think it's actually now one of the biggest reenactments of is it medieval?
Yeah.
Medieval battle, and the Crown Meadow and the Corporation Meadow and Jubilee Meadow, absolutely full with all these people on horseback and everything else. So it's
a sight to see.
It is a sight to see. To be fair, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
With regards to theatre, I know you've done stuff at Chichester Theatre and other places as well. But have you, and I'm kind of putting my Phoenix Theatre Group hat on here, but have you ever actually appeared in Panto?
Yes.
And can I ask what parts you've played?
He sounded guilty saying that, didn't he?
Well, I've done it three times.
Right.
The first did it, I think, at Evesham Arts Centre in a Christmas show there. Pretty sure it was a Christmassy show. Was that
Laurie Griffiths? Was it Laurie Griffiths-Jones directing there?
Yeah, it was called The Ghost of the Golden Guzgog, and I think Ms. Hesling Brown, our English teacher, was involved in it. I think The Ghost of the Golden Goose Gog. Kathy, what was her name? Kathy Colwell was involved in it. That was the first good Christmas thing I ever did. Then I did one at Worcester Swan. That was more or less my first ever job, which was very emotional again, because that was the theatre that I used to go to a lot as a child. So suddenly I'd been through drama school, 21 there, I was doing a show on the stage at Worcester Swan for Pat Truman, who used to run the theatre there years ago. That was the Pied Piper. And I was one of 2 comedy policemen in that, which my sister never forgets, Boggle and Goggle. But then fast forward, I think, to 2008, and I did a pantomime at Wimbledon Theatre, which was a big pantomime run by whatever they're called, the big panto group. And I remember there was a launch event of all their pantos up in North London in a cinema, weirdly, in a foyer of the cinema in Finchley. And Cilla Black was there, and Henry Winkler was there, and Bonnie Langford was there, and all these people who were doing their pantos around the country were there at this launch event, and I was there representing Wimbledon with Gareth Gates, who did it with me. And we did Cinderella, and I played Baron Hardup, and I mentioned it to Giles Brandreth, who used to be a neighbour and good friend in London. And he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing Baron Hardup, Giles, in Cinderella." He said, I did that. Same part, Cinderella, Wimbledon Theatre, 10 years ago. Thankless. Absolutely thankless. Terrible part. He doesn't do anything. Nobody cares about him. You get nothing to do. You get nothing funny. Good luck. And he was absolutely right, as Giles nearly always is about everything in life. He's a wonderful man. But it was thankless. And my sister still teases me to this day with this dreadful routine we had to do about a broken down car. And, well, we're going to have to fix it, won't we? Ooh, she still remembers the whole thing. I blotted it from my mind. It was probably the worst performance I've ever given and the worst experience of my professional life.
Oh, right. So you won't be rushing back then?
No, I was just wrong for it. I mean, some people, I've seen Tim Vine do panto, and it's absolutely superb. And Tim's always good, whatever he does, but he's perfect because he works for the audience, the little audience, the children. He works for the adults. He's very good off the cuff. I'm none of those things. Right. And panto was not for me, and I was not for it. So I do respect anybody who's good in it and who does it well, because it's a real skill, but it's a skill I realised and I didn't have.
So it's no good me asking, if you were going to be in the Phoenix Theatre Group panto for next January, which is Aladdin, what part would you want to do?
I don't want to be the lamp. I think I'd be the lamp. It's a good part. A very good part.
Yeah, very good.
It's polished every night. You get a chance to shine.
Excellent.
Has he passed the audition?
Yeah, that would do. Yeah,
I'd call him in for an audition.
I'd give him the part. So, yeah.
We have got some questions from our community, Alistair. My voice is getting deeper, isn't it? I'm aware. So we've got a question from Penny Sexton, who's age 6, and she lives in the Littletons. And she's asked, where was your favourite place to play or visit as a child in Evesham?
Oh, blimey.
Maybe a park? Or...
Well, one place I can think of for playing actually was, I don't know if it counts, is Morton in the Marsh. We used to go to Morton in Marsh. We used to go to Morton in the Marsh, and there was a wonderful slide there, and it was on grass, because the one in the park in Evesham, I think, used to be on, I can't remember what you slid down.
Like tarmac,
up on grass. Yeah.
It was.
The one in Morton in the Marsh, there was this lovely, sort of huge, worn patch of ground under the slide. So you'd come down and you'd end up in the dust, which was nice, and that was always nice being in Morton in Marsh in the park.
Oh,
to play.
Lovely.
Yeah. And they also had this weird thing in Morton in Marsh Park in those days. I think it's still there. This sort of, I don't know what you call them even, some sort of cement pipe that you put in the ground, to,
we've got one of them
sewage pipe or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. You used to just go into this pipe, and it was just the weirdest thing. So it was always cold. Even on a hot day, the cement was so cold and it was dark, and I used to really like being in there.
Oh, that's fun.
You're asking me, so you're taking me back here. It's a very strange experience.
Down memory lane in Evesham, isn't it? So
it's what makes us. I was in Morton in the Marsh about a year ago. Actually, I was wandering around. I was doing a show in Chipping Norton, so I stopped off in Morton and wandered around and went back to that park. I don't think I saw that thing though, but that's still a very nice place to go.
Yeah, so we've got another question from Chris, who's known as the Fruit and Veg Man in Evesham, and he has asked, is it true that your brother-in-law is a far better snooker player than you?
Well, you'll have to ask the experts. You have to ask John Parrott or somebody, and I'm sure if John Parrott saw us playing, he'd probably say the same thing. Say, yes, Brendan is much better at making breaks. He's got a better eye for the ball, and tactically as well. He's he's maybe not quite as astute tactically, but he can certainly pull off shots that I can only dream of. So yeah, he is.
Bless. So, and Donna Lawson has asked, what's your favourite cheese?
My favourite cheese?
Yeah. Do you have one?
There's not many cheeses I don't like. I don't like Cheshire cheese, but or anything with cranberries in it, which I think is not cheese.
Yeah,
but
I agree with that.
I do. I recently tried Wookie Hole cave-aged cheddar, or Wookie Hole aged cave cheddar or something. That was extraordinary. It just tasted like the inside of wellies, which is what I always think cheese should taste like.
That's what cheese should smell like.
Yeah, I'd say Roquefort is probably my favourite. Favourite cheese is Roquefort. Nice, soft blue cheese, very tangy.
Lovely. And finally, we wanted to ask if you could give a shout out to one of our community members for her community work, where they have been picking litter to keep Evesham clean. Her name is Laura Von Toller, and she's part of the anti-litter team in Evesham. And they do a fantastic job in keeping our town clean, all voluntary.
Yes. Well, thank you, Laura, for what you do and your team of Wombles. Mr. Forbett would be very pleased with you. And remember his motto: if you see litter, don't just walk past, pick it up, boy.
Brilliant.
But it's such a shame, I think, that people like Laura and her wonderful group have to do it. And so I'm so pleased they do. And litter picks can be extraordinarily fun. It makes you feel positive because you're not just moaning, you're doing something positive. And I think that's something that we can all do more of, certain things that you think, oh, why is that like that? Well, it's like that because no one's done anything about it. So why not do something about it? And I think that's the attitude, rather than always blaming the council. Council funds are stretched. But when you think how much money councils spend, I did a big litter campaign at least 20 years ago now for the Environment Agency. And I think the figure then, it's probably double now, was something like £450 million a year spent by councils picking up litter. So it's probably £1 billion now.
Yeah.
So that's £1 billion. I'm guessing, it's an estimate. But £1 billion spent by councils picking up litter because people can't be bothered to take it home with them. They think those people who drop that litter, they're probably the first people to complain about the lack of council provision for this, for that. Why aren't the roads maintained? Why are the hospitals, blah, 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 ambulance, everything else. And you think that's because that money's diverted from cleaning up after you.
Yeah.
So if you can't clean up after yourself, I don't think anybody has the right to then moan about what the council doesn't do, because they're spending a lot of money unnecessarily cleaning up after people who can't just put their litter in a bin or keep it in their car until they get home.
Exactly.
Well done, Laura.
I think you should apply to be on our council in May. We need some councillors, apparently, and we need some new people to stand up with fresh opinions. So we'd welcome you.
Well, I think always
Alistair.
tackling things at root is the key, isn't it? And
it's
getting. Actually, one thing I meant to say. One of my favourite teachers, going back to that, I didn't get around to it. Was one of the most useful things I learned at school was from my biology teacher, who was called Mrs. Gray. And Mrs. Gray, when I was, I think, doing my third year biology, so before it was an option, she got us all to tabulate really carefully everything we ate every day for a week. Didn't tell us why. Breakfast, dinner, breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever else. Breakfast, dinner, tea, everything. So we tabulated everything we ate. And in my day, then it was always, 2 slices of toast with Marmite, crunchy nut, cornflakes, whatever. Well, not in those days. Cornflakes in those days. Everything. And when we analysed it, she went through person by person, 32 of us in the class, how much starch we'd had, how much fat we'd had, how much protein we'd had, how much sugar we'd had in our week, and what that told her about us, and what we were short in, what we were eating too much of. That has kept me aware of food and what I eat throughout my life. And sometimes, your weight goes up and down a little bit, but you think it was an invaluable lesson at age 13 to know exactly what you're putting into your mouth and what it's doing to you. And I don't know, maybe they do, if children still do that at school, but you think, when the government keep talking about sugar taxes and this tax and, this campaign, you think, just get every child at school to do that. And within 5 years, I'm sure you'd see the effects of obesity going down and down and down and down, because people would be aware of what's in their food at a young age, and surely would then say, right, I'm not going to drink those sugary drinks that have got 11 tablespoons of sugar in that are bad for me. Or if I do, I'll just have one a week, not one every break time, And I think that sort of analysis that's where you've got to tackle things. Is not by lumping, things on after the event. It's just educating people at a young age. And as I say, if you're telling people that at 13, by 18, I'm sure the obesity would be, a tenth of what it is now.
Yeah, that sounds like a great teacher. And my son's 15 at school in Evesham, and he's not overweight or anything like that, but he's not. We've never had to do that with him. log it. And that's a really good idea. I might take that advice myself, actually.
Very good.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing when you do and you think, did I really eat that much of everything in a week? And just do it normally. Don't censor yourself. Don't stop yourself from eating what you normally eat for a week, and then look at it. And as long as you know the recommended levels of things.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we know you're a busy man, Alistair, and thank you for your time today. Well, I know you've got some events coming up with Jasper Carrott, I believe, 16th of April at the Grand Opera House in York, and the 24th of April in Bury St Edmunds at the Apex. And then, of course,
yes.
I believe you're also doing the Ludlow Piano Festival for 4 days, 24th to 28th of May.
Yes, if anybody has an interest in piano music at all, I've organised with a team of people 5 days worth of piano events in Ludlow. We've got 4 events a day, some wonderful pianists coming, playing a mixture of it's all classical this time. We might venture into jazz and other things in future years if we have a market for our festival. But tickets so far are selling well, and we've got people coming to play Rachmaninoff and Debussy and Chopin. Some of the best pianists in the country are coming to do that here for 4 days. We're urging people to come for a day and see 4 events, or to stay overnight and see 8 events, or whatever else they want to do. And in fact, one of the pianists is playing a piece by Evesham's own Marcel Zidani, who's a wonderful pianist, teaches many people in the area as well. And he's a composer and has been composing for at least 20 years, I think, Marcel. He's a bit younger than me, just early 50s. But he's having one of his pieces played here on Sunday, the 28th of May by Anthony Hewitt, who's a pianist who plays all over the world, and he's playing a program involving Scriabin, Ravel's music, and a piece by Marcel Zidani. So many reasons to come if you have even a remote interest in piano music to Ludlow for 4 days, or one of those 4 days at the end of May.
Not too far, is it, Ludlow?
It's just up the road, isn't it? Really?
Yeah,
it's not far.
Yeah. My husband's just taken up. My husband's just taken up piano.
Right.
Right.
Recently he's only just started. So our neighbour, he used to teach classical piano, and he's having lessons with her. So it's very lovely. And you've combined it with comedy as well, haven't you? It's a like a 2-piece show.
What I've done over the years has been that over the last 4 years, because I started playing the piano properly when I was about 49, and straight away just thought I want to do this in front of people. I don't know why, because I'm a show off probably. And so I started doing a show, and my wife said, you're not good enough as a pianist to play on your own. You can't be as good as these people, the ones who are coming to Ludlow to play, for instance, in our festival. So she said, you've got to combine it with your comedy. And so reluctantly I did, but she was absolutely right. It would have been awful of me to say, I'm as good as anybody who's been to music school and all the rest of it. I'm just a keen amateur, really. But alongside the comedy, it worked very well. And I did a few shows around the country and performed it at the Regal pretty successfully there as well. But I'm not doing that at the moment. I'm taking a bit of a break from performing that. I'm just doing my dates with Jasper Carrott. We've got a couple in Swindon, I think, which is probably the nearest we come to Evesham. But I've also got a date in Evesham on July the 2nd, I think, as part of the Literature Festival, I think it is.
Festival of Words.
Oh, brilliant.
Festival of Words.
Festival of Words. Yep.
Yeah. I'm going to be there on July the 2nd doing something which is loosely called Desert Island Poems. So it's really my favourite poems in conversation about, why I chose these poems. And a lot of that, again, will go back to the choices Mr. Griffiths inspired in me, and also a teacher we had at O-level called Mr. Craig, who sadly died. He was the first person I knew who died. He died when we were at school, Mr. Craig. But he taught us a lot of poetry, and a lot of that informed my poetry choices. So that'll be a different sort of show again.
Yeah, we'll share those links as well. But yeah, it'd be great to see you at Festival of Words in Evesham on the 2nd of July. And thank you for joining us, Alistair, and for supporting our first podcast, and my Deirdre Barlow voice, and Keith from Phoenix Theatre Group.
Yeah, it's good to catch up with you again.
Yeah, we just wanted to say thank you to our sponsors, A-Plan on Evesham High Street, and we want to thank them, and also just say our next podcast will be next month in March the 20th, and it will cover voter ID and local politics. And you can find out more by visiting eveshamnoticeboard.co.uk. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Goodbye.